Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the Blue Line Blast Podcast. Jim Manager here, co-host Matthew Blittner. We're back again here up on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, where you get your podcasts. And before we dive into everything that we got to talk about, especially the Stanley Cup Final, Matthew, welcome back, buddy, and I hope you're well.
I hope you're doing well too, Jim. We've got a loaded show this week. We're going to talk with veteran Newsday New York Rangers beat writer Colin Stephenson a little later on in the show. As you said, we've got the Stanley Cup Final to preview and break down. The Islanders finally have their new GM. They actually introduced them formally, so there's things to talk about. And there's some questionable things going on around the league that we may as well get to as well. So let's have at it.
Let's start right away. Stanley Cup Final, and it's a rematch of last year between the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers, except this time the Edmonton Oilers have home ice advantage. If there is a Game 7, hint, hint, wink, wink, I don't think we go 7 in this one. But the Oilers get through the Dallas Stars in 5 games. Florida Panthers dismantle the Carolina Hurricanes in 5 games. It's funny, a little foreshadowing. Everybody's seen the clip. Matthew Tkachuk, Connor McDavid shaking hands at the end of Game 7. Hey, we'll see you next year. It's really good that the two best teams, and by the way, they were seeded 3rd in this playoff format. So any hooting and hollering about this playoff format, you got the two best teams, and they are the two best teams going head-to-head in this thing, and it should be an exciting series.
Absolutely. Last year was, I'll call it the appetizer. This year it's going to be the main course. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Obviously dessert comes after a main course, but that's getting way ahead of ourselves. The one thing, and we're going to talk about this, the one thing that scares me with this series is Stuart Skinner. We saw throughout the playoffs last year, and we saw throughout the playoffs this year. When he's on, great job, and it's going to be a heck of a series. When he's not on, Jim, a lot of people said, oh, well, Florida versus Carolina 2 years ago, it was extremely close. Yeah, it was a sweep, but every game was decided by 1 goal. Maybe it'll definitely be closer this time around. And Jim, it was not closer this time around. It was an absolute nightmare for Carolina. And I just wonder which Stuart Skinner shows up. Can the real Stuart Skinner please stand up? Because if he's going to be the one who has allowed 30 goals in his last 20 playoff wins, Jim, this is going to be a hell of a series. If he's going to be the one who's allowed 51 goals in his last 20 playoff losses, Jim, this is not going to be a series.
No, absolutely not. Look, and I think this is the difference coming in here, right? I think both teams are better. Florida is clearly better with the depth they have. But let's be honest, the Edmonton Oilers are better defensively. They have puck-moving defensemen now. They have Evander Kane back. Yes, Zach Hyman will not be in the series. Broken wrist. That happened in the Dallas series.
Absolutely huge loss.
Huge loss because he was a hit leader in the playoffs, hit leader for them. He turned it on. But Corey Perry scoring. Vasily Podkolzin scoring. Kasperi Kapanen scoring. Adam Henrique, Mr. Playoff, for the Edmonton Oilers. We saw what he did for the New Jersey Devils. He's looking to win a Stanley Cup finally. But you look, everybody's slotted right. Matthias Ekholm's back. And the thing that intrigues me about the Edmonton Oilers is that when you can hold a team to 4 shots in the 3rd period when you're holding a lead and you're attacking, sometimes the best defense is a good offense. And when those guys are going offensively and they're keeping the puck at the other end, Stuart Skinner only has to make a couple saves here and there. And look, we always said there was the good Stuart Skinner who gets shutouts, the bad Stuart Skinner that we saw in round 1. Then there was never an in-between point. We got the in-between point in Game 4 against Dallas when he stopped 33 of 34 shots and single-handedly won them the game. Now, get credit to Chris Knobloch for making adjustments because the Oilers' penalty kill was not the greatest in the first game. Now he put Connor McDavid out there. That changed the entire dynamic of special teams for me.
Jim, putting Connor McDavid on a penalty kill is a cheat code. It is a cheat code to the highest degree. You're taking the most skilled offensive guy in the world who has underratedly gotten better at the 200-foot game defensively, and saying, oh, by the way, don't disrupt someone else's power play and help us kill off the penalty. Jim, that shouldn't be legal. That shouldn't be fair at all. Okay? That's like, okay, yeah, it's good, but your best defense is a good offense. Jim, that's not a good offense. That's a great offense right there. If Wayne Gretzky was still playing today, he'd be licking his chops, being like, wait a second. I got Connor McDavid out here on the penalty kill? Sign me. If Wayne Gretzky was playing with Connor McDavid right now, and they were both on the penalty kill, Wayne Gretzky, he had just under 3,000 career points. He'd have just under 5,000.
Yes, it's very, very true. He did. Look, also, but I'll say this. Florida, I know Edmonton 6-1 at home in the playoffs. Florida 8-2 on the road. And here's a stat for you. I like to, I know you're a big stat guy. So in the last 5 road games, the Panthers outscored their opponents 27-7, plus 20. Goal differential of 20. Like, this is what they're doing. Their depth is carrying them too. That third line with Brad Marchand, I love it, with Anton Lundell and Utu Listerainen. I mean, Paul Maurice is pushing the right buttons. Guys coming in the lineup, coming out of the lineup. When Jesper Boquist goes into the lineup, it's a guaranteed goal. It feels like it anyway. AJ Greer's in there as well. Defensively, Ekblad and Seth Jones are playing so well. And like you said off the top, Bobrovsky's the better goaltender entering the series, although we heard that in every other series that Stuart Skinner was in, and he outperformed Jake Oettinger again in the Western Conference Final. But it's clearly, look, if Stuart Skinner is going to play like he did in the Western Conference Final minus game 1, and it's not all his fault, the discrepancy is not as big as everybody thinks it is. But the Florida Panthers, if they establish their game early with that aggressive forecheck, it's going to be a tough sledding for the Edmonton Oilers.
Look, you hit a lot of things right on the head there. But one thing that you said is, if Florida establishes their game, and that's where Edmonton is going to really miss Zach Hyman. As you mentioned a few minutes ago, Zach Hyman was their hits leader. And now a lot of people may not think of Zach Hyman as a hits leader because, 50-goal scorer, great scorer, all that. Zach Hyman is the type of player you want in your lineup in the postseason. The guy has skill. He has grit. He knows how to play the playoff style game. Okay? That is Zach Hyman. You take him out of the equation. Yes, the Oilers still have other guys who are willing to play that way. But there's a difference between willing to play that way and playing that way. Zach Hyman played that way. He knew what it took. And Matthew Tkachuk, Sam Bennett, Sam Reinhart, Brad Marchand, the list goes on and on. Barkov. It's ingrained in Florida's DNA. It is not ingrained in Edmonton's DNA. Edmonton has learned to embrace it, but it's not part of their DNA. And without Zach Hyman, that is going to be a severe X factor in this series. So Connor McDavid, yeah, he's going to go out there. He's going to try to do what he can. He's not going to be throwing hits, getting dirty, and trying to muck it up with Matthew Tkachuk. Leon Draisaitl is not going to be out there saying, oh, Brad Marchand, you want to cross-check me consistently? Well, I'm going to cross-check you and wail on you right back. That's not going to be how it's going to go. So without Zach Hyman, it's going to be very interesting to see if Edmonton can match or take away Florida's ability to establish their game.
Yeah, I will say this, though, counter on that real quick. Evander Kane, that's where Evander Kane comes in, and I think he can play that role of Zach Hyman because he's fully healthy. And that's the difference this year for the Edmonton Oilers than last year. They're fully healthy. Like guys like Draisaitl, guys like McDavid, they're not battling injuries like they were last year, right? They aren't battling those injuries. They were banged up heading into the final. Evander Kane played 2 games and missed the rest of the series. And he had surgery. Now he's back. And the difference is, to me, I think the puck-moving defenseman for the Edmonton Oilers, they won't be able to be kept in their zone. And here, you said it before. Draisaitl McDavid playing 200-foot games. There's a reason why Leon Draisaitl got a first place vote for the Selke Trophy and 18 second place votes. Like, I've noticed it. He's embracing playing defense. He shut down Jack. I mean, look, other two guys are on the other side. Alexander Barkov, the winner. Sam Reinhart's right there as well. And to me, if you look at it, it's going to be a very close series. Again, the difference to me for the Edmonton Oilers this year than last year, Connor, Leon, Evan, Bouchard show. This year's everybody's chipping in. The depth scoring's carrying them. And, you know, pray if McDavid and Draisaitl have another series like they did against the Dallas Stars if you're the Florida Panthers, because when those guys go off and they're getting depth scoring, they're a difficult team to beat.
Speaking of depth scoring, and I looked this up, I forget who wrote it. It might have been Dan Rosen at NHL.com. If I have it wrong, I apologize to the writer out there. Both Florida and Edmonton each have 19 unique goal scorers this postseason. Jim, you carry 23 guys? You know, forget about the Black Aces and all that stuff. Carry 23 guys on an active roster, 22 guys, 2 of them being goalies. So basically you're saying that all but one player on each team has scored this postseason? That's depth scoring to the extreme. Okay, that is the definition of depth scoring. Now, you said about, you know, the Selke Trophy. I just want to point out, how the heck did Nico Hischier not win the Selke Trophy? Not to take it away or anything, but come on, Jim.
I voted for him. He was on my ballot, and he was number 1 on my ballot. You can go see it. It's on the Professional Hockey Writers Association on the internet. I put Nico Hischier number 1 to win the Selke Trophy just the way his 200-foot game. So I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah, the writers who vote, I mean, will obviously absolve you because you just said that you voted for him. How do you not vote Nico Hischier as the number 1? It's a damn disgrace at this point. Not to say that Barkov is not deserving. He obviously is, but come on, Jim. Come on.
Yeah, I know.
How is Nico Hischier not the Selke Trophy winner?
I mean, like, first of all, the fact that he finished 4th place and not even in the top 4 is ridiculous in the first place. And it shows, like, I'm not saying there's a Florida bias here because I don't want to start internet problems like with the no state income tax. That's just an excuse to me. Teams that just don't know how to do a good job because, you know, Yanni Gourde signed a 6-year deal at $2.3 million. So you're telling me he's a $4 million player elsewhere because of no state income tax? Oh, yeah, okay. That's just a good value contract for a team that knows how to win. Oh, but that's off the rails. But Nico Hischier deserved it. He's played well. Look, I've noticed Leon playing well, Connor doing the same thing. I wouldn't be surprised to see those names up there. You know, Austin Matthews has been in there, Mitch Marner as well. But I agree with you, dude. The way he's played the whole year, 200-foot, killing penalties, absolute leader. He's put the team on his back. That's the definition of a Selke Trophy to me. And he didn't win it again. It's just underrated New Jersey players doing what they do every year.
All right, Jim, before we, you know, we're up against the clock a little bit before our first guest, veteran sports reporter from Newsday, Colin Stephenson, joins us. So before we bring Colin into the show, quickly, who do you have winning the Stanley Cup final and in how many games? So
I got the Edmonton Oilers winning in 6 games. I think they're going to do it and win it in South Florida. It has a feel that it's their time. They're motivated. It's all business for them. They know what to expect. I know the Florida Panthers are the defending champions, but it is very, very hard to repeat. And the Oilers just have a lot of things going for them. And selfishly, I want to be there to see it. So I'll say 6 games.
Okay, so Edmonton and 6 from you. And now it's time that I divulge my thing. My dad's older brother said that I had no balls for giving it out early on, for giving sneak preview. So I'm giving my thought right here, right now on the Blue Line Blast podcast. Jim, I know it's bad podcasting when everyone agrees, but I'm going with the Edmonton Oilers as well. However, I'm going Oilers in 7, not in 6. I do not think that Edmonton is going to be able to close it out in South Florida. Edmonton will, in my estimation, close it out back at home, which will end the long, long Canadian drought No Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup since 1993. Great year that I was born, snap it up. And, that is who's going to win it. And I have Connor McDavid winning the Conn Smythe again, but this time in a winning effort. So a bat-to-bat Conn Smythe who wins it in a loss and a win. Jim, I don't think we've ever seen that before. I could be wrong, but I don't think we've ever seen that before.
No, I don't think so. No.
And
we have not.
As I alluded to earlier in the show, Jim, last year was the appetizer. This year's the main course. Next year will be the dessert. And so, with that being said, it's time for a quick word from our non-existent sponsor, and then we will bring in Colin Stephenson to talk about the New York Rangers. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back now with our guest of the week. He is Newsday's veteran sports reporter covering the New York Rangers. His name's Colin Stephenson. Colin, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you? It's a long off season when your team doesn't make the playoffs, and I'm trying to maximize my off season time.
Well, that is a great point, but at this point, all but two teams are in the off season, so only two teams have made it as far as they've wanted to at this point. But
yeah,
with the Rangers, there's been a lot of new. It hasn't been that quiet of an off season, as you're well aware. They have Mike Sullivan as their new head coach, and I want to get you started here. With all the reports, all the rumors, all the stories that came out with all the seeming dysfunction and distractions around the team last season, does having a new coach like Mike Sullivan with his pedigree, does that help try to fix that, or is that just masking up a bigger problem?
Oh boy, I guess two things can be true at the same time, right? No, I think getting Sullivan is a good thing and should help calm things down. I think this is a guy that's well respected around the league. I think the guys in the locker room will be okay with it. Look, the things that upset them last year are past, right? They're gone. Barclay Goodrow is not coming back. Jacob Trouba is not coming back. So I think at some point we all have to move forward from where we are. You can't live in the past. I don't know how they felt about Laviolette. I think he did a good job, and I think that they. It seems this group has a track record of performing very well in for the coach in the coach's first year, and maybe not as well the second year. I don't think Laviolette did anything wrong that would necessitate him being asked to leave, other than the fact that the team didn't make the playoffs, and so he had to go. And now I think that the general manager has gotten the guy he wanted all along. He happened to be available somehow. He became available, and Chris Drury got his man. So we'll see how it works. But I think things should be a little calmer this season than they were going into last season. Of course, we still have a whole summer to go. So there could be stuff that pisses people off that happens between now and training camp. So we'll have to stay tuned.
Speaking of the general manager, Chris Drury, well, he went into a new extension right before the announcement of the new coach. And it was a little surprising from the outside just because, all the trades that he made, all the upheaval, the quote-unquote mutiny with players, how they didn't like him and everything that was going down, and the distractions, as Matt said. Do you feel that the extension was warranted? And do you feel that, having a guy there now, third coach, is it more ownership just wants to stay with the same guy, or is it ownership wants to win like ASAP and get the cup back to New York?
Well, I think it's that, right? They want to win. I look, if Drury was in his, I didn't know when Drury's contract was up, but it makes sense that it was up and it needed to be renewed. I don't think you were gonna fire the general manager after one bad year. His first 3 years they made, the conference final, and then, got bounced by the Devils in the first round, but still had 100 points, 107 points that year, and then won the, President's Trophy and made the conference final again in the third year. So, I mean, after 4 years, if the fourth year was a bad year and the first 3 were good, I think the general manager, deserves to keep going for a while. So he needed a new contract. So he got a new contract. I mean, I don't really have a problem with that. The timing was a little weird. But it is what it is. I mean, I don't think you whack a GM after one bad year. I mean, they could bounce right back. I mean, they got the coach that they always wanted now, and you still you had a number of guys have down years at the same year. Normally it's one guy or 2 guys that have a bad year, but it seemed like a number of guys had down years in the same year. So, odds are at least some of those guys will bounce back, and they should be, back in the hunt for a playoff spot in next season. And no doubt there's a lot of work to be done. But if you didn't keep Chris Drury, right? I mean, if you moved on from Chris Drury, then you would have had to find a general manager, and then that would have been one more thing to do. So let's see what happens. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff that he's going to have to finish, on his agenda to tighten up the roster and manage the salary cap. And there's questions of, are there guys that he wants to move out? And will he be able to do that, and all these RFAs that he has to re-sign and stuff. So there's a lot of work to do. And if you would have moved on from Drury and you would have had to hire a new GM and bring him in to have him do all that work. It might have, it might not have been efficient.
Very true. We see with the Islanders right now, they've got a whole lot of things that their new GM, Matthew Darche, has to do. So with the New York Rangers, obviously you can only imagine the amount of things between, will they buy out or find a way to force Mika Zibanejad to move? Will they do something with Artemi Panarin? Will they trade Chris Kreider? The list goes on and on. So I do agree with you that they did need some stability, although if you asked people around the New York Knicks from the past 20 years, I don't think anyone would say, oh, well, one bad year can't a GM, because we've seen what
it's happened, but how often does that work? I mean, you know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, you all are trying to win a Stanley Cup every year, but only one team does. So should the other 31 general managers get fired when they don't win a cup? I mean, it's you gotta at some point look at the bigger picture and realize that my thing always is this: if you move on from one guy, you got to find somebody to replace that guy. You want to trade Mika Zibanejad? Great. How are you going to replace him?
All very true. With the point that you just made with Zibanejad, I'd like to get your thoughts, actually. With Zibanejad having a full no move, with Panarin having 1 year left, a big cap hit, no move, Kreider having 2 years left, at a fairly reasonable cap hit, maybe a drop high, but fairly reasonable with the cap going up. Do you foresee any of those 3 being back, or do you feel that any of those 3 might be, sent out the door, be it either by trade or buyout this offseason?
I don't. I shouldn't say to all of them. I mean, I feel like it'd be really hard to move Mika. 5 years left on the contract is a long time, and he's got a full no move for the first 4 of those. What would be his incentive to give that up, to waive that? You know what I mean? Like, unless you're putting him in a position that he wants to be in, why would he give that up? I mean, he negotiated for that in good faith. He had a great year. They gave it to him. Why would you give that up? I mean, I don't see him giving that up. He loves New York. So why would he leave? Panarin, I don't get why people want Panarin to go. Like, what is that? He's got 1 year left on his contract. He will be coming off the books a year from now. In the meantime, he led your team in scoring this past season and was your best offensive player. It's not like he led the team by accident. I mean, he was the best offensive player, right? I mean, who else? So I don't really get that why people would want to move on from Panarin. And if you did, sure, you could trade him. But again, if you're trying to win the Stanley Cup, you're not just selling him off to clear cap space. You're going to want something back that's going to make you a better team, right? Or at least, I just don't see it. He's got 1 year left. He's played very well for this team. Led the team in scoring this past season, had 30-odd goals, had 120 points the year before. There's a story that came out late in the year about, some perhaps, he's been accused of inappropriate behavior, which, I guess the team says it's investigated it and dealt with it and whatever. The team made some nebulous non-statement or whatever. But from a production standpoint, from a hockey playing production standpoint, if this guy's your best offensive player, what are you doing? Why would you move on from him? 1 more year, and then he comes off your books, and then you can, look, if we look at potentially who's going to be available as free agents next summer, maybe that's the time when you want to have that, that $11 million coming off your books, right? I just don't see them trading him now, because how does it help you? How does it help your team get better if you trade Artemi Panarin now? Makes no sense to me. Mika seems to be very difficult to move. I can't see how they can do that. Not that it's impossible, I suppose, if you get creative, but I really just don't see how that's going to happen. Kreider, okay, maybe you could move him. He also, though, has some trade protection. He's got a limited no trade, right? So I'm not sure that he wants to leave. I would guess he probably doesn't want to leave. So, he's going to work to, leverage that no trade clause into keeping him here. So that's not going to be as easy to move on from Kreider as people would like to think it is. So I think to a degree they're going to run a lot of it back. If you're talking about changes, who can they move? Well, they can maybe trade Keandre, who's a restricted free agent. But again, I get back to my original point, which is this is not a guy that you're trying to move just to get him off your cap, right? This is a guy that if you move him, you want to get something back for him that helps the team. So, you have a 25-year-old defenseman entering his prime who people say had a bad year, but if you look at the numbers, they're not that bad. And, he is 6'5" with a long reach, and he's a great skater. If you give that up, if you move that somewhere, move that contract somewhere, what are you getting back to replace him with? Right now they don't have enough left-handed defensemen on the roster. So if you move your number one left-handed defenseman off the roster, you need to get back a number one left-handed defenseman, right? So I just don't see them doing as much. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, but I just don't see how much of it they can get done.
No, it's a very fair point on all the players, right? And a lot of it seems like, everybody talks about the contracts and the no moves and everything like that. I want to bring it back to the coach for a minute. And, the last couple of years, with Gerard Gallant and Peter Laviolette, now Mike Sullivan's there, the big thing is the young players on the team, which, obviously Filipino's not there anymore. Capo Caco's not there anymore, but Alexis Lafreniere, he had a down year, but as you said, Colin, everybody kind of had a down year last year for the Rangers. But do you see Mike Sullivan, giving these young guys a chance a little bit more in top tier positions, like the first and second line? Because that seems to be the knock on these coaches that have come through New York lately.
It remains to be seen. I've read that, he's not great at giving young players, and yet, the year that he got promoted from Scranton Wilkes-Barre and took over the team and they won the cup that year, he had a bunch of players from that Scranton team that had come up and played a part in them winning a cup. So I don't know, what to expect. I also, I wasn't real familiar necessarily with the Penguins roster. It seemed like they kept, trying to extend it as long as they could with Crosby and Malkin and Letang. And it seemed like they don't have a ton of prospects necessarily. So I don't know how the Penguins prospects over the last, 5-6 years compares with what the Rangers have going on. And I don't know that. Look, if you're trying to win the Stanley Cup today, this year, how much of a leash can you give your young players? You know what I mean? Like, you need guys you can count on. So with young players, you may not know that. And so you give them a look, but I don't know. Like, people are mad that Zach Jones hasn't played more than he has. But has he deserved to? When he's been in there, has he done enough to force himself to stay in the lineup the way Will Cooley came up? People didn't think Will Cooley was going to make the team, and he forced his way onto the team with a dynamite training camp in preseason, and he's been nothing but, going up since, right? So that's a guy that forced his way onto the team, forced their hand to keep him and to keep him in the lineup. Zach Jones didn't do that, right? Zach Jones is a guy that, third-round pick, and he's an offensive guy. He runs a power play. A lot of people think that Zach Jones is the greatest thing, until, he hasn't forced his way into the lineup on a nightly basis. So I don't, and I'm not trying to trash Zach Jones, by the way. I'm just saying, the young guys that people want to see out there is fine, but they also want to win. So if you have a veteran guy, for instance, they got Riley Smith. And Riley Smith played, every night. He's got scratched one game. People might have liked to have seen Brendan Othman or Brett Berard or somebody like that. They didn't want to see Riley Smith. But you know what? You knew what you were going to get out of Riley Smith. And you don't know what you're going to get out of the young players. And they have to prove it. And they can't just be given anything. They have to earn it.
And all very salient points, Colin. And, we appreciate you sharing your expertise here. Before we let you go, we've got to ask, and we're going to change track completely away from the New York Rangers at the moment, but the Stanley Cup Final is starting this week. It is a rematch between the Edmonton Oilers and Florida Panthers. Now, obviously, we don't expect you to delve very far into it because you're not around the teams on a daily basis, but if you had to pick, if you were a betting man, who do you think is going to win this series, given that Florida won last year? They were up 3-0. Then Edmonton came back, forced Game 7. Florida clamped down. Florida won. Who do you think is going to win this series?
Who do I think is going to win? I don't know. I'm rooting for Edmonton for a number of reasons. Number one, I'd like to see Connor McDavid win a Stanley Cup at some point, right? I mean, he is the best player in the game. I'd like to see him win a cup. So I'm rooting for him for that reason. I'm also rooting against Florida because, frankly, I hate their style, man. Like, it's just they have a bunch of annoying players that just like start crap and just, I don't want them to win 2 years in a row. I just, but because what happens is you end up with, all these leagues are copycat leagues. So if you have a team with Florida that's just loaded with, pests up and down the lineup and guys that cheap shot you from behind, Sam Bennett and Brad Marchand and Kachuk and all these guys, then that's what everybody's going to go out and do. They're going to get guys that I don't want to watch play. What I want to watch is I want to watch Connor McDavid flying up and down the ice. I want to watch Draisaitl. Those are the guys I want to watch. So I want that team to be the team that people copy rather than the other guys. But, there's not much to choose. As you said, Matt, 7-game series last year. So I think both teams are fairly similar. So, I think this is why we watch. But if I had to, gun to my head, I suppose. I mean, I'm taking Edmonton because they have the best player.
Well, very well said, Colin. And again, we thank you for coming on the Blue Line Blast podcast this week. We know you're very busy with things. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you go out and read Colin out at Newsday. Obviously, you can follow him on Twitter/X for all your Ranger updates, and we'll be back after a word from our non-existent sponsor with more Blue Line Blast podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. after our delightful chat with Newsday's veteran sports reporter Colin Stephenson, who gave us a glimpse into the inner workings of the New York Rangers, who have a fascinating offseason ahead of them. Jim, I think fascinating can be the correct word there. He mentioned
interesting is another word I could use. Interesting. They have a lot of work to do.
They do, but another team that has a lot of work to do, New York Islanders, who last week when we spoke with Newsday's other veteran sports reporter, Andrew Rose, who covers the Islanders had just announced Mathieu Darche as their new GM and executive vice president. Since then, they've actually introduced him formally via a press conference. And Jim, he didn't say anything groundbreaking, but he also said a few things that deserve to be mentioned here. First and foremost, Patrick Roy will be back as the head coach of the New York Islanders. It's a move that you almost sort of had to make. At this point in the offseason, you really can't not have a head coach in place. And I know a lot of people were probably saying, oh, well, new GM, how about a new coach? But Darche is, in my estimation, making the correct move in keeping Roy, at least for 1 year. Yes, he has a 3-year deal kicking in, but at least for 1 year. That way, at the moment, they do seem to be in synergy in terms of wanting to play faster, more up-tempo. We'll see how it goes. But, Jim, just your thoughts.
Yeah, I like the move. I mean, I think Andrew kind of hinted at it last week, kind of saying that he believed that was the right move and that was probably what was going to happen, and allow Patrick to, pick his own staff and give him the right players for the roster, and let's see how it works. Again, Patrick Roy, has a new extension that kicks in. I mean, he still has 1 year left and then an extension. So to fire a guy and pay a guy 4 or 5 years to go away when he's really not a hot commodity on the market to take and ease that away, probably not the right decision by the Islanders. They got a lot of young prospects coming, a lot of young players. And I like the move, Matthew. I mean, if you look at it, Lou kind of brought him in. They got in the playoffs, but he really never did anything to improve that roster to give the Islanders a shot to go back to the playoffs. It was kind of same old roster that went to the back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals because that's what he believed in. That's all well and good, but when you're starting to clash with your coach and the coach is starting to make comments about the roster and the players on the roster, you had to make some moves here. And I like the fact that Darche said, hey, this is our guy. This is what we're going with. But he also said, and I know you're going to point this out, we have to develop in Bridgeport because it's been atrocious. And he got rid of all the staff there.
Absolutely. And Jim, the one thing about Bridgeport, though, according to reports, and again, we haven't heard anything formally from the New York Islanders. According to reports, Chris Lamoriello, Lou's son, was extended. Lou gave him a contract extension maybe a week or two before the axe fell on Lou. So now Chris Lamoriello was not present at Darche's introductory press conference. But we didn't hear anything from Darche about whether he would be back or not. We know that, supposedly he's been given a new contract. Jim, if he's still running the show in Bridgeport, they're not going to develop any further because it's the legal definition of insanity, expecting a different result while doing the same exact thing over and over.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think he's got to make his decision on Chris Lamoriello. Look, I know Lou wants his kid there, but again, I heard beforehand that I thought Lamoriello wasn't going to be extended, Chris that is, and that he was leaving once Lou wasn't extended and had his contract renewed. And I think that's like the big thing to me. I think Darche needs to bring in his own guy. And if you look at the record under Chris Lamoriello, it's not very good in Bridgeport, right? It's really not. So to me, I think Darche should bring in his own assistant general manager, get rid of. This is what New Jersey did. Anything from the old guard, they just moved on from. Like they're just not bringing anybody back. Anybody that was there under the Lamoriello regime, get your own staff in place because like you said, the definition of insanity is just doing the same thing over and over again and expecting get a different result. They don't get it. Bridgeport stinks. Like, they stink. And they haven't made the playoffs, and their prospects aren't developing. And that was something Matthew Darche emphasized in his press conference. We need to develop our young players. Our AHL team has to be a feeder system to the NHL. He was in Tampa when those guys had Kucherov, Palat, Johnson going through their system. Like, all the guys that are there now went through the system. He understands the importance of development, drafting, developing, and doing all of that. I think you got to move on from Chris Lamoriello and Dave Conte and all those guys and bring in your own staff.
I agree with you. And speaking of moving on, Jim, is it time in Dallas to move on from Pete DeBoer after he essentially threw Jake Ottinger under the bus following their loss to the Edmonton Oilers? I mean, it's an elimination game. For those who missed it, it was Game 5, elimination game. First 2 shots on goal, Ottinger allows in. Not 100% his fault, by the way, because Dallas was not playing defense in front of him. Now, obviously, as a goalie, sometimes you do have to just, buck up and put the team on your back, and he didn't do that. But he got pulled, 7 minutes and change into the game? And then for Pete DeBoer to say afterwards, well, I don't want to place all the blame on him, but, if you look at his record against Edmonton the last couple of years, it's not a small sample size, and he's lost. Jim, that's not a head coach. And I know, and we're going to talk about it, you're going to bring it up about how Ottinger tried to defuse the situation. Jim, that's not the words of a coach who is going to be around long term. Okay, I remember when Alain Vigneault said after his last game as the New York Ranger head coach after an abysmal loss to the Philadelphia Flyers, I deserve to be back. We have a great team. We're right where we need to be. Jim, he was asked 3 hours later.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, we seen Pete DeBoer do things goaltenders, and everybody remembers Alan Walsh's photo with Marc-Andre Fleury and a sword to the back when he was with the Vegas Golden Knights. And Pete DeBoer, let's look at this. Been to 2 Stanley Cup finals is not 2 Stanley Cup final. I'm sorry. Yeah, that because NBA finals and Stanley Cup final. So, all the editorial people don't come after me about that. So, but he's been there twice, hasn't won. He's, I believe, 8-0, 7-0 in Game 7.
8-0.
And thank you for the correction there. I appreciate that. But you look at it, the decision-making in the Western Conference Final has not been good, right? The last couple of years, they lose to Edmonton. First of all, they lose to Edmonton in 6 games last year. And they, supposedly are a better team, and they lose in 5. No defense. Yeah, I get calling a timeout. I get pulling your goaltender. But you should put him back in the second period because the rest of the team got to work itself out. And he didn't. He paid a price because, and then the coach just throws him under the bus. And he does it again on Saturday, too. And you just paid this guy an 8-year extension to be your franchise goaltender. By the way, Pete DeBoer has 1 year left on his deal. There are some rumblings from player exit interviews that the players are not happy with Pete DeBoer and the decision that he made in Game 5. It's going to be on Jim Nill to decide what's left on this market because, again, Pittsburgh still has to make a coaching change. Boston has to hire somebody as well. Who's left after the coaching carousel goes around? Yes, Ottinger was very mature about it. He's going to use it as motivation. He understands it. He owned it. He's owned his play. But there's a point that Pete DeBoer gets to, and he can't get over the hump. 3 Western Conference Final appearances, you can't get past it. To me, it tells me that maybe a new voice is needed. Now, I'll be interested, and it probably will never come out, but you wonder if some of the players that voice their opinion are free agents that may not be back and looking to come back in Dallas as well and may not want to play for this coach. But I do think a coaching change is going to happen in Dallas just because I think he's run his course there. And I know he wins everywhere he goes, but he left Vegas. Bruce Cassidy comes in, takes takes over, and wins the Stanley Cup. I think he's gotten to a point in Dallas. Now I think the group and look, there were a lot of passengers with Dallas as well. A lot of guys didn't show up. Maybe, that's a roster thing as well for Jim Nill to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. The roster is on Jim Nill to manage on that. But I don't see at this point in the offseason Jim Nill firing Pete DeBoer. If he was going to fire him, maybe he does it like a day or two after. But at this point, who's out there? As you said, who's out there that they're going to bring in? It's the same thing about, the Islanders, why they probably kept Patrick Waugh. Who's out there that they're going to turn to? They're not going to turn to a college coach. It seems like, assistant coaches, like David Quinn, got some interviews in the coaching interview cycle this year, but not anything that was substantial enough to really land any assistant coaches the gigs. I think they don't give Pete DeBoer a contract extension. He goes into the season as a lame duck head coach. If they get off to a great start and they just have a great year, okay, great. And then, if they once again fall short of the ultimate victory, then he's gone after the year. Thanks for getting us to where you got us. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. If they get off to a bad start or they go through a lull mid-season where they lose 7 out of 9 or something like that, okay, see ya. They bring in someone on an interim basis and then you see what happens. But I just can't, at this particular point, it's already June. I can't see them firing Pete DeBoer at this moment. If it was May 20th, I can see them firing Pete DeBoer. This episode is being published on June 3rd. I can't see them firing Pete DeBoer.
Look, I'm going to say this one thing. The Boston Bruins made a head coaching change in August. No one thought Bruce Cassidy was going to be fired. And they made a coaching change before the start of the season. And they brought in Jim Montgomery. That's the only thing that says to me, if there's somebody out there that they're looking at, say, for instance, Jay Woodcroft doesn't get hired, and Jim Nill really likes Jay Woodcroft. Maybe he goes through, the channels in the offseason and keeps conversations going and says, hey, we'll keep you in mind if we get off to a slow start. Or, you know what? It's August. You know what? I've got my roster in place. I brought some guys back that didn't like the coach. I'm going to make the move, and I'm bringing Jay in. Just, again, if he's available. We don't know if he's going to land in Boston. We don't know if he's going to land an assistant coaching gig somewhere. I think he's a very good head coach. I think he deserves another shot. Dallas is a great opportunity for Jay Woodcroft. Again, I have not heard anything about it. I'm just throwing it out there, hypotheticals. But I think it would be an interesting landing spot for Jay Woodcroft, especially later on in the offseason, once Dallas has its roster established, because it seems like there's a little bit of upheaval. Guys didn't like what happened. And you can't have that tension going into next season when you've just signed your star franchise goaltender to an 8-year extension.
Well, Jim, once again, I agree with you entirely. I think it's about time we wrap this Blue Line Blast podcast. Actually, before we do, last week, neither of us gave a blast from the Blue Line on type of hot take. We can't go 2 weeks without one.
No, we can't. No. I got one for you. So my Blue Line Blast this week is stop crying over no state income tax. It has nothing to do with the team's success. There is no competitive advantage to it in Florida, Vegas, Dallas, Nashville, and or Washington, because I'll throw this out here at you. If it was such a competitive advantage, Nashville would have won the cup. Instead, they finished 30th of 32, and Seattle would make the playoffs every year and go to the Western Conference Final and be Dallas and a combination of Dallas, Vegas, and Seattle in the Western Conference Final all the time. I'm tired of hearing about it, and let's credit the general managers for putting good teams together. The excuse of no state income tax does a disservice to those men.
Well, Jim, you took my Blue Line Blast from me, so I'm going to go with something else, and this is going to be very controversial, what I'm about to say. I'm not going to shy away from being controversial. This might hurt some people's feelings. I'm not even going to apologize. But as we all know, the Hockey Canada trial for the 2018 team is going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
They just wrapped up the testimony part, the evidence portion of the trial. Right now, they are going to be next week moving into the closing arguments. Jim, I don't know whether or not they're going to find the players guilty or not. I hope they do find them guilty. It's an absolute travesty what happened. Here's my hot take. Here's my blast from the blue line right now. Regardless of whether the players are found innocent or guilty, there is going to be some stupid NHL team, be it one or more, who either the players are going to be found innocent and the teams in the NHL are going to say, oh, we want them, or they're going to be found guilty, they're going to go to jail, and when they get out of jail, the NHL team is going to be like, oh, we want them on our team. The NHL has proven, very much like the NFL, that they believe, erroneously, they believe in giving out second chances. Okay? Evander Kane is a prime topic in that. There's no reason, with all the issues that Evander Kane has had in his career, that he should be playing in the National Hockey League right now. There is no reason why Joel Quenneville should be back in the National Hockey League. There's no reason why Stan Bowman should be back in the National Hockey League. And there are plenty of other people, but I'm not going to go through naming them all.
It's a long list. It's a long list.
I'm telling you right now that innocent or guilty, there are 5 players on trial. At least one of those players, whether it's after the trial or after a jail sentence, is going to end up back in the National Hockey League. Jim, that is my blue line. That is my blast from the blue line.
Woo! That's fire, baby. I love it. I love it. And, you know, we were joking around real quick, joking around the other night in the locker room. Somebody's like, well, how about Carter Hart back to Philadelphia? I'm like, no, but I agree with you. I think somebody's going to do it, and we're all going to talk about it.
They absolutely should. For the record, I want it out there on the record. They absolutely should not.
I agree.
To go back to the international hockey. I'm just saying there is a team or teams who will be stupid enough to give them that chance. They don't deserve it, but there will be a team or teams who will be stupid enough to give them that.
I 100% agree with that. That's a great way to end another episode of the Blue Line Blast podcast. Thank you to Colin Stephenson for coming on again from Newsday, talking Rangers, talked Stanley Cup Final, Dallas Stars, and the Islanders, plus a couple of Blue Line Blasts. To close it out, Jim Biringer, Matthew Blittner here. Guys, iTunes, Spotify, where you get your podcast, up on YouTube. Please subscribe, like the video, comment as well. We'll be back again next week for another great episode of the Blue Line Blast podcast. Take care.